Here's a question. Do you just play one MMO? And if so, how long have you been playing for? And how often in the week do you play? Sit with that for a moment, won't you? Hey there, I'm Dying Legacy, and for years I played World of Warcraft, with nothing really in between. I started in the Burning Crusade, and I just stopped playing at the end of Battle for Azeroth. I didn't stop because of how the game was, or anything mind you. I was just burned out, and I'd had my fill. I'd played well over a decade, never trying other MMOs, and my only downtime from the game was between patches. And to be completely honest with you, I did play from 7 AM in the morning until probably about 7 AM in the morning. So, you know, I like the game a bit. And now I can't even load up the game, never mind play it. The will is there because Dragonflight looks great, and that's why I asked and wanted you to think about how much you play your favourite MMO. Are there times where you stop playing for weeks or even months at a time just because you can't find the motivation, even though you do want to play it? And that's a clear sign of burnout. Usually we'll go and get addicted to something else for a couple of months and repeat the process, eventually returning to our kind of definitive favourite, until again, as you've guessed it, being wholly unmotivated to play it and starting the burnout circle once more. The thing is that once you start playing another game entirely, eventually you can come back and enjoy the game you became so unmotivated to play in the first place. And perhaps it'll have new content waiting for you. But content alone is never really enough, as content itself is never really the content to begin with. The real content is the experience it gives you. You know, the experience of getting so absolutely angry at something that you want to break a monitor or invest in a cryptocurrency. You know, top tier anger. And sometimes it's just the experience of memories. You know, the friends you've met, good times, the bad times. You know, those days you were late for work and were told for your 5th time, hey, show up on time or I'm going to fire you. And of course, that night you sat there going, right, it's time to go to bed early, and then you found yourself randomly getting dressed in the morning and your PC's still on. You made it to work on time, but that's the experience. But I digress. You feel motivated to play again when it feels like a new experience, and for it to feel new or fresh, even when it could be completely the same as when you played last, you do need to spend time away. At the end of the day, a game is not a job and it shouldn't be played as if it was. Granted, if you do content creation, it can sometimes feel or even be a job, but that makes it even more important to step away for a bit. On the idea of doing content creation, I started this channel creating the Elder Scrolls Online content. I played in my free time and I even streamed it, and burnout began to set in quickly and heavily, to the point where I could only play to make content. I wanted to play quietly in my off time for my own enjoyment, but I really couldn't. However, at this point I started playing Final Fantasy XIV a lot in my off time and started streaming that as well. But just like the Elder Scrolls Online, I developed a pattern of playing all the time, and of course, just like the Elder Scrolls Online, I found Final Fantasy hard to even look at. But this is where the idea of content being experienced rather than the content of the game itself plays a part. I started to play Lost Ark very, very moderately in my off time, which was fresh and new to me, the same as Final Fantasy XIV was, and the same as the Elder Scrolls Online was. However, I didn't make content nor did I stream it more than once a month at least. And during this time, I found myself playing Final Fantasy XIV and the Elder Scrolls Online a lot more often, and I was enjoying them. I was motivated to do so and sometimes excited to play the moment I got home or from the moment I woke up. The experience feeling fresh each time, not feeling like a routine, though I keep bringing up the experience. But what the hell do I mean? Is the experience you crying yourself to sleep at night because you didn't get the drop you want? Or is the experience you being screamed at by your girlfriend because you haven't seen her in months and you've only played the game continuously? I have been playing the same game over and over again, and I know them inside and out. So how are they fresh and new? Well, we can look at this from a few perspectives. Let's begin with speedrunners. How many years do speedrunners play a given game over and over and over again? Games that do not give frequent updates, patches or expansions. Let's say Mario 64. Players have played Mario 64 for over 25 years. A little longer than most MMOs, I grant you. That in lies the experience. Constantly aiming for personal bests and constantly looking for more interesting and more genius ways to essentially break the game and hit a world record run. It's a goal, but it's an experience for the player when it happens. And the same can be said for all of the From Software Souls games, from speed challenges to no-hit runs, and even using controller methods that border on mental torture and even mental illness, which we still come back to. Right now I want to talk about builds though. Playing a Souls game is usually quite cut and dry. Start at point A, get to point B, and done. The challenges and even the untold story choices in between can create many fresh and different runs, but it's the builds that make it unique. Play as a mage one run, restart and play as a great sword wielding berserker the next, restart again and play completely naked. And then in comes the personal challenges. You know, fresh experience every time. Even though obviously for a lot of us, once is enough and we'd have our fill. And we'd seek a new experience elsewhere. While others will decide to beat Dark Souls with a rock band drum set. This was done by GB Bearsley. Not to mention during the era of Twitch plays, Twitch chat also beat Dark Souls. Took 1,000 hours and almost 1,000 deaths, but they did eventually do it. I do feel for a lot of the Twitch viewers' mental health in that situation, but fair play to that. Obviously, these aren't MMOs, but an experience is uniquely different for everybody, and although I am talking from an MMO relevant point of view, the idea of a player experience is shared with every game in many different ways. But the key point to all of this is, usually when it comes to games like Dark Souls or Super Mario, players do tend to finish the games before they start enacting strange and wonderful challenges. But don't get me wrong, people do try weird and wonderful challenges in MMOs as well. Does anyone remember the person who made a fresh Pandarian in World of Warcraft, but never left the starting zone and never joined the faction? They gathered herbs until they reached max level. They completed an interesting challenge, however, they never completed the game. For instance, the streamer Annie Fuchsia got every single World of Warcraft achievement. That counts as finishing the game, right? Well, it would, if it wasn't right at the end of the Shadowlands expansion, of which the Dragonflight expansion then released shortly after. This is an incredible feat, and that's the thing, an MMO tends to be updated regularly with patches and expansions, so the game never really ends. The content is endless, and that's where the player experience comes in. Either you are continuously feeling a new experience and running out of energy to keep up the pace with the continuous releases, or the game as a whole starts to blend together. Instead of feeling new, it starts to feel like different shades of beige. You log in less and less, thinking about it constantly as it's almost a daily routine, where you're barely able to look at it. It's kind of like falling into a hole with no bottom. And this is basically what playing World of Warcraft after a decade felt like to me. And the same goes for years of ESO that followed. That led to Final Fantasy in the same way. For some context, I would play these day and night, as a lot of players do, but as I mentioned earlier, I started to play Lost Ark after I started to burn out from Final Fantasy XIV. I'd play for 4 or 5 hours a week, not 4 or 5 hours a day, a week. And then I'd jump onto Final Fantasy for a bit, and the next day I'd play Final Fantasy for 2 or 3 hours, and then play the Elder Scrolls Online. I'd start to look forward to the 2 or 3 hours to play. Burnout not really becoming a thing, but I also started to appreciate the MMOs I was playing. I was definitely more aware of their flaws, but I was also very aware of what was drawing me in to play them in the first place, and what was making me play more. And I was enjoying them more for it, and vastly more than I did when they were the only games I played for months, day and night, never touching another game. And on top of enjoying them more, if I do happen to get bored or burnt out of the game, at any stage, I have other games to fall back on now. And don't get me wrong, it's not about playing your favourite MMO in very limited time frames, or only playing it once in a while. It's about seeing what other MMOs have to offer, as if you're popping outside for a moment to get some fresh air. You can enjoy a single MMO above everything else you do, and even forever never feeling burnout. But after a time, the most dedicated player may find that their enjoyment is actually routine, and it's not actually sincere excitement. So maybe if you do find yourself playing just one MMO, maybe it's time for a change. Try something else. You never have to quit a game, just take some time off. Play something different, and you might just see some of that excitement and enjoyment come back to you. And maybe even another MMO to sink your teeth into. And hey, if you've ever found yourself burnt out or just unable to log into your favourite MMO, let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see your opinions on what games you were playing, or even what games you're tempted to try in their place. If I've got you thinking about trying another game, or you're just curious, subscribe, as I'll have more content like this in the future. And also like the video, it'll boost my ego and it'll let me know you did in fact like it. I already mentioned I streamed MMOs, well, You can find me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/dyinglegacy. Anywho, thanks for watching the video. Do take care of yourselves, guys. I'll catch you in the next one, so you guys keep being awesome, and see ya!